My family cut me off for 5 years. Then I found out they hid my great-uncle's death, faked his life, and stole his in. Now I own it all. There's a moment when you're pulling into a place you haven't seen in years. The trees look the same. The air smells like salt and rust, but something feels off in your gut. That's what it was like driving back into Fair Harbor. My name is Elias Monroe. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in this tiny coastal town in Maine. I hadn't been back in 5 years. Not since the big fallout. Not since the silence. But a month ago, I got a thick cream envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was an invitation to my Uncle George's 70th birthday party. My name was handwritten. That alone was weird enough. But what sealed it was the RSVP card, already marked attending in someone else's loopy script. Someone had decided for me. Theo, my husband, wanted to throw the whole thing out. It's a setup, he said, holding the envelope like it might bite him. Your mom didn't even sign her name. You really think they suddenly want to reconcile? But a part of me did. A stupid, rusted-over part that still wanted to believe my family could come around. Maybe this was a peace offering. Maybe they missed me. Maybe they were finally ready to talk about everything. So, against Theo's better judgment, we drove up the coast on a rainy Saturday morning. As soon as we crossed into town limits, my chest started tightening. The party was at the old Cliffside Inn, a familiar place, now full of unfamiliar energy. I hadn't known my parents had moved in there, not until the invitation arrived. That place used to belong to Uncle Peter, my great-uncle, really. The man who taught me how to fix things with my hands and listen more than I talked. The man who disappeared from my life 3 years ago without warning or explanation. I parked the car in the gravel lot beside the porch and just stared. Yellow streamers clung to the columns like they were embarrassed to be there. A banner reading Lucky 70 sagged in the middle. Kids in plastic tiaras zipped through the garden, shrieking. Someone's aunt was already tipsy off boxed wine, trying to balance a paper plate on her knee. Inside, it was worse. Not hostile, just distant. People hugged me like they were touching a ghost. My mom kissed my cheek like we hadn't lost 5 years. My brother Sam clapped me on the back and said, "You look good," but didn't meet my eyes. No one mentioned Theo, even when he stood 2 feet away. And then came the applause. Someone wheeled Uncle Peter, or who they said was Uncle Peter, into the room. Gray cardigan, thin frame, thick glasses. But my stomach dropped the second I saw him. Theo stiffened beside me, leaned close, and whispered in my ear. "That's not him." I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. "What do you mean?" He turned to me slowly, face pale and steady. "Elias, that is not Peter. Get your coat. Now." I didn't move. Couldn't. The man in the chair raised a trembling hand and gave a weak smile. Everyone clapped. Toasts were made. But in my ears, there was only the thud of my heartbeat and Theo's voice, tight and certain. "That's not your uncle." And just like that, the whole room began to feel like a set, like I had stepped into a play I didn't audition for, and everyone else already knew their lines. Something was very, very wrong. Theo didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He just took my hand, firm, not panicked, and said again, "We need to go. Now." I followed him out of the inn like I was underwater. The muffled sound of laughter behind us. My mother's voice somewhere in the background asking if we wanted cake. I didn't answer. I couldn't. We got to the car. Theo unlocked it, ushered me inside, and slammed the door. Then he walked around, got behind the wheel, and hit the lock button like we were in danger. The engine rumbled as he reversed slowly, not looking back at the building. He didn't speak for a few miles. Neither did I. Finally, he said, "You know I don't forget faces." I nodded. I knew. Theo remembers every waiter, every barista, every neighbor's kid from 5 years ago. His brain stores faces like photographs. It's eerie sometimes, but I trust it. "That wasn't Peter," he said, eyes locked on the road. "The man in that chair? He looked like him, sure, but not him, not even close." I stared out the window, the trees turning to blurs. "It's been 3 years," I said, voice rough. "People change." Theo shook his head. "Not like that." I didn't want to believe him, but something had been nagging at me even before Theo spoke. That moment when the man in the chair smiled, it was off. Too rehearsed. The way he scanned the room instead of meeting my eyes. Like he was watching the scene, not part of it. I'd sent Peter birthday cards every year since the silence. I left voicemails, emails, no replies. My mother always waved it off. "He's not feeling well. He's tired these days." He gets confused. Excuses, always with that forced cheer. But now I was doing the math in my head. I hadn't seen Peter in person since the year I came out. The year I told my family about Theo. The same year the calls stopped. The same year the inn changed hands. "You think?" I started, but my throat closed up. Theo didn't let me finish. "Yeah, I do." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Like I had been standing too close to something dead and only just noticed the smell. "What does that mean?" I asked. If that's not him, then where is he? Theo gripped the wheel tighter. That's the question. I tried to steady my breathing. My hands were shaking. Why would they do this? I whispered. Theo didn't answer at first. Then he said, quietly, maybe they didn't want you to ask. We drove in silence, the coastline vanishing behind us. Every memory I had of this town felt suddenly suspect. I thought I came for a party, a reunion, but it felt more like we had just escaped a trap. We parked 2 streets over from the inn, far enough not to be seen, close enough to watch. Theo turned off the engine but left the keys in the ignition, just in case we had to leave quickly. I was still holding my phone like it weighed 50 pounds. Are you sure you want to do this? Theo asked, turning to me. No, I said, but I have to. I tapped the number and waited. When the dispatcher picked up, I did my best to sound calm. Hi, I'm not sure who to talk to about this. I'm visiting family in Fair Harbor, and I believe someone is impersonating my great-uncle. He was supposed to be the guest of honor at a birthday party tonight, but the man they introduced isn't him. And I think something's wrong. The woman on the other end was polite and efficient. She asked for names, addresses, my contact info. Then she said they'd send someone to take a quiet look. No lights, no sirens, she promised. True to her word, 20 minutes later, a dark gray sedan pulled up to the inn. 2 plainclothes officers stepped out. 1 male, 1 female. They didn't look like cops, which I guessed was the point. Theo leaned forward. That's them. I watched as the officers made their way up the front steps, pausing to chat with someone near the door, probably my brother, Sam. His body language changed the second they flashed their badges. That easygoing stance stiffened. He turned and disappeared inside. A few minutes passed. Then everything started to shift. The music in the inn dropped to background hum. Conversations got quieter. The kids stopped running in and out. Guests were standing in little clusters, whispering. One woman walked out, pulling her husband by the elbow, a nervous look on her face. The officers weren't making a scene, but their presence rippled through the party like smoke. I spotted my mother near the windows. She was talking fast, one hand clutching a wine glass, the other fluttering like a nervous bird. Her voice wasn't audible, but her face said everything. Tight smile, too many blinks, a forced laugh that looked painful. Sam appeared again, guiding the officers to the back room where they'd wheeled out Peter. I pressed my face closer to the windshield, heart thudding. The man, the impersonator, was still in his chair, staring blankly ahead. He didn't speak right away, but then the male officer pulled something from his jacket, maybe an ID photo, maybe a driver's license. Something small. He held it up in front of the man's face. The reaction was slight. A blink, a subtle nod, a long pause. Then he said something. Theo squinted. You see that? The man in the wheelchair was speaking now, quietly. The officer leaned in, scribbling notes. Then, something strange happened. The man smiled. A tiny, satisfied kind of smile, like he had just gotten away with something. I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. I don't know what's going on, I whispered. But this isn't just about Peter. Theo nodded slowly, eyes still locked on the scene. No, he said. It's about your whole damn family. The call came the next morning, just after 7. I hadn't slept. Theo brought me coffee, but I barely touched it. When the phone rang, my hands were already shaking. Mr. Monroe, the voice on the other end said. This is Detective Calhoun with the Fair Harbor Police Department. I wanted to follow up on the inquiry from last night. I swallowed hard. Okay. He was professional, calm, almost too calm. I'll be direct with you, he said. The man presented as your great-uncle, Peter Monroe, is not Peter Monroe. His legal name is Robert Green. He's your mother's cousin on her father's side. He has no known health issues, but when questioned, he claimed Peter asked him to pretend for the sake of a peaceful family event. That's a lie, I said immediately. Peter would never do that. I figured, Calhoun replied. And you're not wrong. We pulled the records after speaking with the man. Your Uncle Peter passed away 3 years ago. I sat back like I'd been punched. What? I whispered. Officially, the family claims he died of heart failure in his sleep. They said he wanted a quiet burial. No fuss. No service. No one told me. I said. No one said anything. According to them, that was also Peter's request, the detective said, a little doubt creeping into his tone. But we're opening a formal inquiry into the timeline of events, because there are some inconsistencies, mostly financial. I rubbed my face. What kind of inconsistencies? There were transfers. Large ones. The inn was signed over under questionable power of attorney paperwork. Bank accounts that were in Peter's name continued activity for over 2 years after his documented date of death. We'll be speaking to your family again. He paused. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we're potentially looking at identity fraud. Possibly elder abuse if we find Peter was incapacitated prior to his death. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, breathing. Theo walked in from the kitchen, saw my face, and froze. I met his eyes and shook my head slowly. He's gone, I said. Peter died 3 years ago. Theo set the coffee down, came to sit beside me, pulling my hand into his lap. They lied, I said. All this time, while I was sending cards, leaving voicemails, asking to visit. My voice cracked. They lied and let me believe he was still alive. They needed you not to know, Theo said quietly. That thought hit harder than anything else. They'd cut me out, lied to me, covered up a death. And now, they had wheeled out some half-relative in a cardigan and glasses to keep the story going. It wasn't just a secret. It was a performance. And I had been the last to realize the curtains had already closed. It started as a whisper, a blurry photo on someone's Instagram story. Just a quick clip of the birthday party, streamers, clinking glasses, a toast. And in the background, the man in the wheelchair. The not Peter. Then came the Reddit post. An anonymous user claiming to be a local guest wrote a short paragraph about attending a party where someone was impersonating a dead man for inheritance fraud. It got a few hundred upvotes, then a few thousand. By day 3, it hit local news. The headline wasn't subtle. Family accused of impersonating deceased relative to keep in, investigation ongoing. They blurred names, but not faces. Not mine. Someone must have tagged me in the comments because my inbox exploded. Most of the messages were strangers asking if it was true. A few were worse. Wow, you really turned on your own family for attention. People grieve in different ways. You didn't have to humiliate them. One message just said, snitch. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't look away. Threads started forming, some defending me, most speculating. Was it really fraud? Maybe Peter faked his own death. Maybe I was just mad about being cut out of the will. I stayed off social media after that. But the damage was done. One night, around midnight, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. But she called again, and again. Eventually, I picked up. The second I answered, she was already yelling. Do you have any idea what you've done? I didn't respond. You went to the police. You called reporters. You've made us look like criminals. I didn't talk to the press, I said calmly. And I didn't make you do anything. That was all you. There was a pause. Then her voice dropped into something colder. You left, she said. You left this family years ago, Elias. You married that man. You ran off and made your own life. And now you think you can come back and sit in judgment. I didn't leave, I said. You pushed me out. We protected you, she snapped. You think we wanted to lie? You think we had a choice? There was so much I wanted to say, but all I managed was, Peter would have told me. Her voice cracked then, not from sadness, but fury. You weren't here. You didn't see how sick he got. You didn't come visit. You didn't send flowers. You don't get to pretend you were close. That one cut deep. We were close, I said, barely more than a whisper. He was the only one who gave a damn about me. She didn't answer, just hung up. I sat in the dark afterward, the silence ringing in my ears. I thought outing the truth would feel like justice, like resolution, but all I felt was small, like the whole world had watched me pull a pin out of a grenade, and now they were blaming me for the explosion. The email came 2 days after the fallout hit local TV. Subject: regarding the estate of Peter Monroe. From Walden and Bray Legal. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, another journalist fishing for a quote or some spam addressed to current resident. But it wasn't. It was from Peter's longtime solicitor, a man named Julian Bray I remembered meeting once when I was 19. Peter had introduced us over tea and lemon cookies, telling me with a wink, Julian's the only one who knows where I hide the good scotch. Now Julian was writing to inform me that Peter had named me the sole beneficiary of his estate, the inn, the land surrounding it, his savings, personal assets, and even a small antique boat that had been dry docked for decades. I stared at the email for 10 minutes before I managed to scroll down. It wasn't just a passing mention. Peter had rewritten his will 7 years ago, and the documents made it crystal clear. To my great-nephew Elias Monroe, for whom I leave this home and everything in it, with the hope that he makes of it what I never could, a place to be wholly himself. Julian attached scans of the signatures. Dates. Witnesses. I called him. I don't understand, I said as soon as he picked up. Why didn't anyone tell me? Julian sighed. I tried. Your mother said you were estranged. That contact would aggravate old wounds. I took her at her word. I shouldn't have. I sat back, heart pounding. She knew. I asked. She and Sam both? Yes, he said simply. Your uncle's wishes were not ambiguous. I mailed a certified copy of the will to the inn the week after he passed. They never responded. I followed up. Once. Then I got a voicemail saying it was being handled within the family. I assumed you had declined. I never heard a word, I said. Julian paused. Well, now you know. And the will is binding. The inn legally belongs to you. If anyone's been living there or using Peter's account since his death, they've been doing so without rights. I hung up a few minutes later, numb. It all clicked. The silence. The excuses. The fake Peter. They hadn't just cut me off out of pettiness or shame. They cut me off to keep what was mine. They'd been living in the inn rent-free. Running it. Cashing in. Pretending Peter was alive to justify holding onto the property and funds. And when that got too hard to maintain, they wheeled out a stand-in with a cardigan and glasses to fool the guests and me. The birthday invitation wasn't a reconciliation. It was a distraction. A stalling tactic. One last performance to keep the lie alive just a little longer. I wasn't supposed to find out. But I had. And now, they couldn't run from it anymore. I waited until dusk to call her. My mother. The shadows were long across the sidewalk outside our rental. Theo had gone for a walk, giving me space. I sat on the back steps with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to it ring. She answered on the fourth try. What? Not a question. A dare. I just got off the phone with Peter's lawyer, I said. Silence. Then a dry laugh. Of course you did. You knew, I said, trying to keep my voice level. You and Sam. You knew the end was left to me. You knew Peter died 3 years ago. And you said nothing. She didn't deny it. Not even a stutter. I did what I had to do, she said. You don't get to act like some victim now. You left. You walked away from this family and never looked back. I walked away? I repeated. You stopped answering my calls. You lied to me about Peter being too sick to talk. You buried him without even telling me he was gone. He didn't want a funeral. You didn't want me at it. I shot back. Another pause. Then she said, coolly, you think just because he wrote your name on a piece of paper, you earned what he built? I let out a bitter laugh. I earned it every time he made room for me when none of you would. Every time he sat with me in that garage, teaching me how to fix a busted lock or clean paintbrushes. Every time he asked how Theo was and actually meant it. My mother's voice sharpened. He was lonely, Elias. You filled a gap. That's all. I felt something crack open in my chest. That's what this is really about, I said. You thought I didn't deserve it. So you took it. Her voice dropped low. We did what we had to do to survive. You wouldn't understand. You've always had the luxury of walking away when things got hard. And you've always had the luxury of blaming me for your own choices. Then I asked the question that had been rotting in my gut since the moment I knew Peter was really gone. What did you do with him? She didn't respond. Where is he buried? I asked. Where is he? The cold came through the phone line like a draft. You don't get to ask that anymore, she said. That was it. The final nail. I stared at the quiet screen after she hung up. The sky above me was turning the color of bruises. For years I had carried the weight of wanting something back from her, an apology, an explanation, even just a sliver of warmth. But now I knew. There was nothing left to salvage. When I returned to the inn 2 days later with the new keys in my hand, the place was empty. On the kitchen table was a single envelope. No address, no return name. Just one sentence, scrawled in my mother's sharp, impatient handwriting. You always did know how to take things you didn't earn. I folded the note in half and dropped it in the trash. Then I sat in Peter's old armchair and let the silence settle over me like dust. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Once the police reviewed the documents from Julian Bray and traced the financial records, things started falling into place. Charges were filed. Nothing dramatic, no courtroom drama, no orange jumpsuits, but enough to matter. Financial misconduct, impersonation of a deceased person, concealment of death. Sam and my mother didn't fight it. Probably knew they couldn't win. Their lawyer worked out a deal. No jail time, but a long list of conditions, restitution, public record acknowledgement, and strict probation for 3 years. Their assets were frozen, their names added to a fraud registry. The inn's utilities were rerouted to my name. The accounts were closed. I didn't go to the hearings. I didn't need a judge or a courtroom to confirm what I already knew. They lied. They stole. They erased Peter and me from the life we were supposed to share. I stayed at the inn after they left. It was strange, at first. Like living in a photo someone else had taken. Peter's slippers were still in the corner of the hallway closet. His jacket hung by the back door. The small hand-carved bird he used to keep on the fireplace mantel was still there, facing east. I found his handwriting in the margins of books. Grocery lists tucked behind old receipts. A dusty teacup beside a canister labeled Theo's Blend, because Peter never forgot his name. That first week, I didn't touch anything. I just walked the house, room by room. Let it speak. There were no ghosts. No creaking floors or flickering lights. Just silence. Heavy, still, honest silence. One night, I lit a fire in the hearth and sat in Peter's armchair. The one he always said had just the right lean. I closed my eyes and breathed it in, the faint trace of lavender oil, old books, and the ghost of pipe smoke from another life. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt certain. The people who should have stood beside me had tried to erase me. But Peter didn't. Even when they shoved me out of the picture, he made sure there was a door waiting when I came back. I stayed there, still, until Theo walked in with 2 mugs and a cautious smile. "House any quieter than you remember?" he asked, settling into the chair across from me. "Not quieter," I said. "Just finally honest. We didn't say much else that night. We didn't need to." Later, I walked out to the edge of the cliff behind the inn, where Peter used to sit and sketch the ocean. The breeze was cool, the waves below crashing in steady rhythm. I imagined him there, pencil in hand, humming under his breath, looking over at me like none of this had ever gone wrong. And I whispered, I made it back. Not to Fair Arbor. To him. To myself. And finally, home.